What kind of child sends their life savings to a billionaire? Not out of admiration. Not for attention. But as a contract. It wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't even a plea. It was an offer. A tiny envelope. A trembling hand. A number scribbled in red ink. $338. And a message so unexpected, so piercing in its honesty, that it made the coldest man in the country stop everything. No one, least of all the sender, could have predicted what he would do next. But what he did changed everything. Would you have opened the letter? Stay. You need to see what happened next. The apartment smelled faintly of rubbing alcohol and boiled cabbage. Outside, sirens moaned like tired ghosts, echoing through cracked windows that hadn't closed properly in years. Ivy Quinn sat on the floor, knees tucked to her chest, eyes fixed on the narrow hallway that led to her mother's room. The wheezing came every 13 seconds. She counted. She always counted. Rachel Quinn, once vibrant and sharp as a morning breeze, now lay in bed, small, pale, and shrinking. The illness had moved fast, like a thief in the night, and by the time they had a name for it, all the doors to treatment had already slammed shut. Insurance didn't cover it. Her job let her go. The waiting list at the free clinic was 8 months long. And David Quinn. He was just a voice now. Occasionally a message that went unanswered. He had made his choice 2 years ago, and it wasn't them. "Mama?" Ivy whispered, creeping toward the door. "I'm okay, baby. Go draw something," came the weak reply, followed by a cough that rattled the walls. But Ivy wasn't drawing anymore. She stood in the kitchen, clutching the only thing she had left, a chipped ceramic jar with the word dream scribbled on it in blue crayon. She poured the coins out first, then the bills, wrinkled ones, birthday gifts, tooth fairy dollars she'd never spent. She counted slowly, lips moving with every number. $338.12. Not enough to buy a miracle. But maybe. Just enough to buy attention. That night, while her mother slept, Ivy sat at the tiny table by the window, her hands stained with pencil lead. She wrote on ruled paper, every word carved out of fear, hope, and the kind of honesty only a child could summon. Dear Mr. Knox Wilder. My name is Ivy. I'm 10 years old. I know you don't know me, and I know you're very busy with important things. But I wanted to ask you for an investment. I'm sending you all the money I have, $338.12. I'm not asking you to give me anything for free. I'm asking you to help my mom get better. She's sick. Really sick. And I can't fix it by myself anymore. But I think maybe you can. If you help us, then this money is yours. And if you can't, then maybe just read this and know that I tried everything I could. Sincerely, Ivy Quinn. She folded the letter, sealed the envelope, and placed the money inside. She didn't cry. She didn't pray. She didn't even tell her mom. The next morning, she walked 5 blocks to the post office and asked the lady at the counter how to send something to a billionaire. The woman blinked. "Excuse me." Ivy held out the envelope. "It's important. Really important." And somehow, through some twist of fate, or perhaps something more, her letter would land in the hands of a man who had stopped believing in anything except numbers. And this one, 338, was about to change his world. The envelope arrived sandwiched between quarterly stock reports and a diamond-encrusted invitation to a gala he would never attend. Knox Wilder didn't open his own mail. But Helen did. Helen Weston had worked for Knox for 13 years and knew better than to interrupt him unless a building was on fire, or the economy was. But that morning, something about the envelope made her pause. The handwriting wasn't polished. It was small, pressed too hard against the paper, each letter wobbling as if written by someone whose hands were trying not to shake. There was no return address, just a name, Ivy Quinn. She stared at it a moment longer, then broke protocol. Knox Wilder stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked half of Manhattan. The other half he either owned or had turned down. He wore all black. No tie. No smile. His watch cost more than most people made in a year, and yet, he barely glanced at the time. When Helen entered, he didn't turn around. I said no interruptions until the Singapore call. I know. But Helen hesitated. This came in the mail. You'll want to read it. He finally turned. The paper crinkled between his fingers. He unfolded the letter and read it once. Then again. Silence fell, thick and unexpected. He lowered the letter slowly, his gaze still pinned to the final line. That signature. That offer. That boldness. Who is she? I've already started looking. 2 hours later, Knox was in his office, feet propped on the edge of a desk made from salvaged aircraft metal. Screens blinked softly around him. On one of them, a photo of a girl with tangled hair and eyes too old for her face. 10 years old. Lives in East Bronx with her mother. Mother's name is Rachel Quinn, ex-nurse, single parent, recently diagnosed with late-stage Hodgkin's lymphoma. No insurance. Father's listed, but hasn't been in the picture for years. The kid's been saving up for who knows how long. Birthday money, odd jobs, even returned school lunches. Knox said nothing. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the letter, still unfolded in his lap. You're not seriously considering. What do you think this is? He cut in, holding up the letter. A plea for pity. Helen blinked. Isn't it? No, Knox murmured. It's a pitch. That night, Knox sat alone in his penthouse, a glass of scotch in one hand, the letter in the other. He didn't hear the rain. He didn't feel the cold. He was 12 years old again, sleeping under a broken roof in Ohio, listening to his mother cough and thinking if he could just make $1, he'd make 10. And if he could make 10. But he'd buried that boy long ago. Too deep to matter now. You're not asking for help, he whispered, as if Ivy could hear him. You're asking me to believe in you. He chuckled dryly. No one ever did that for me. The next morning, Ivy's mailbox clanged. Inside, a thin white envelope. No stamp. No return address. Just her name, written in the cleanest, sharpest cursive she'd ever seen. She tore it open with trembling fingers. Miss Quinn. I've received your investment. Consider it reviewed. You'll be hearing from me. Ah, Wilder. Ivy stared at the words, her heart pounding. She didn't understand what it meant. But she knew, something had begun. And somewhere across the city, Knox Wilder had made a call to his private attorney and said 4 simple words. Help them. Quietly. Completely. The man in the tailored suit stood at the edge of the hospital hallway, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold through a glass window. Rachel Quinn sat upright on the hospital bed, a paper in her hand, disbelief hardening into defiance. Her skin was pale, lips dry, but her voice, when it rose, was sharp as broken glass. I didn't authorize this. The nurse shifted uncomfortably. The bill has already been paid. Chemotherapy, medication, follow-ups, it's all covered. Full payment. Anonymous donor. Anonymous. Rachel scoffed. No such thing. Ivy stood beside her mother, wide-eyed and silent. She recognized the name on the paperwork. She had seen the clean cursive before. "Mom?" she began, gently. Rachel turned, fire in her eyes. "Did you know about this?" Ivy hesitated. "He wrote back." That night, when they returned to their apartment, now with a working heater thanks to an anonymous maintenance request, Rachel sat at the kitchen table for hours, the letter folded neatly beside her, untouched. She stared out the window, the city lights blinking like distant promises. "Nothing is free," she whispered. "Especially not from men like him." Knox Wilder didn't expect gratitude. But he hadn't expected war, either. "She refused the second installment," Helen said, arms folded tightly. "Even sent the medication back. In person." Knox pinched the bridge of his nose. "She's proud. She has every right to be. She's sick. She's also not wrong." There was a pause. "You want to stop?" Helen asked. Knox looked out over the city, silent for a beat. "No. I want to disappear." From that day on, the help came in ways Rachel couldn't trace. The hospital didn't ask for insurance. Pharmacists said, "Don't worry, it's on the tab." Groceries were delivered when she was too weak to walk. One morning, a winter coat appeared at the door, the exact size Ivy needed. "And Ivy flourished." She started drawing again. She laughed more. She walked to school taller, with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. She still wrote letters. But this time, she didn't mail them. She kept them in a showbox under her bed, addressed to Mr. Knox Wilder, each one dated, each one ending with the same line. "Thank you. I don't know why you care. But I do." Nearly a year passed. The woman who once collapsed trying to get up the stairs now walked Ivy to school with a scarf around her head, and color slowly returning to her cheeks. Rachel never asked about the packages anymore. She no longer sent them back. But she didn't talk about Knox either. One evening, Ivy found her mother staring at the showbox under her bed. The lid was off. The letters were scattered across the floor, read, reread, and gently returned. "He never replied after the first one," Rachel said. Ivy nodded. "I know. And yet." Rachel's voice broke, just a little, "He never stopped helping." They sat in silence, the kind that says everything. Somewhere in a high-rise office, Knox sat alone, staring at a photograph taken from a security camera. A girl, now 11, hugging her mother in front of a school. Rachel was smiling. And Knox, so used to empty numbers and hollow victories, let out a long breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He never called. Never visited. Never asked for thanks. But every day, he read the next letter Ivy placed in that box, quietly intercepted, quietly kept. Not because he was waiting for something in return, but because for the first time in years, he felt like someone was writing to him, not about him. The knock came early on a grey Sunday morning. Not loud. Not urgent. Just steady. Deliberate. Rachel opened the door, her robe cinched tight, eyes guarded. The man standing there was taller than she remembered, somehow sharper in presence though unchanged in appearance, dark suit, clean cut, no trace of uncertainty. But there was something else in his eyes now. Something quieter. Less bulletproof. "Knox Wilder," she said flatly, arms crossed. "Took you long enough. Can I come in?" She hesitated. Then stepped aside. Ivy was at the small table near the window, coloring in a sketchbook. When she saw him, her pencil stopped mid-stroke. "You came," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You grew," Knox replied, A beat passed. Then Ivy stood and walked up to him, hugged him without asking. He didn't expect it. His arms froze at his sides for half a second. Then he held her back. And something cracked open. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Ivy had once written that letter. The air was thick with something unspoken. Knox cleared his throat. "This won't be easy to say," he began, "and it might sound impulsive. But I've thought about it for a long time." Rachel's expression tightened. "I don't want to just write checks," Knox continued. "Or send boxes. Or read her letters like I'm some distant idea in her life." He looked at Ivy now. Directly. Gently. "I want to be part of it. Officially." Rachel's jaw tensed. "What does that mean, exactly?" "I want to adopt Ivy." Silence. Like a dropped glass that never hit the floor. "You what?" Rachel said, barely blinking. "I'm not trying to take her away. I'm not trying to erase you." "God, no," Knox said quickly. "But she's already changed my life. I see something in her. Her grit. Her heart. The way she keeps getting back up. I see everything I wish someone had seen in me." He took a breath. "I want to give her everything I never had. And I want to do it as her father." Rachel stood slowly. "You don't get to just walk in here in your expensive shoes and rewrite our story," she said, voice low and shaking. "You helped us. Yes. You saved us in ways I'll never be able to repay. But that does not give you the right to take her." "I'm not taking her." "It sounds a hell of a lot like you're trying." Ivy sat frozen, her little hands clenched in her lap. "Mom?" Rachel's eyes flashed toward her, but softened. "Baby, go to your room for a minute." "No." Ivy's voice was small, but it didn't tremble. "I want to stay." Later that night, Rachel sat on the fire escape, arms wrapped around her knees. The city sprawled out below her like a mess she was too tired to clean up. Knox stepped out quietly, holding 2 cups of tea. "Chamomile," he said. "Least I could do." She took it without a word. They sat for a long while. "You scare me," Rachel admitted finally. "Not because I think you'd hurt her. But because you could give her everything I never could. And I'm terrified that she'll stop needing me." "That's not how it works," Knox said. "I still think about my mother every day. I would have given anything to keep her safe. Just like Ivy would for you." Rachel looked at him then, really looked. And she didn't see the billionaire. She saw a man who'd once been a little boy with nothing but a roof that leaked and a mother he couldn't save. The next day, Rachel sat across from her daughter at the kitchen table. Sunlight spilled in through the cracked blinds. "How do you feel about it?" she asked softly. Ivy's eyes welled, but she didn't cry. "It doesn't mean I don't love you," she said. "But when he says my name, it feels like I'm more than just a kid with a sick mom. It feels like I matter to someone big. Like I could be big too, one day." Rachel nodded slowly, tears finally coming. She reached across the table and held her daughter's hand tight. "You already are." When Knox returned a few days later, Rachel opened the door before he could knock. "I have conditions," she said. "Name them." "She stays close. We stay a family. You don't raise her to forget where she came from." "Agreed. And you better mean it." He looked her square in the eye. "With everything I have." The courtroom smelled like paper and polished wood. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, indifferent to the weight of the moment unfolding beneath them. Ivy sat in a high-backed chair beside Knox, her legs swinging nervously. Rachel sat on her other side, one hand on her back, steadying her like an anchor in deep water. Across the room, a judge flipped through a stack of forms. "This is unusual," the judge murmured, peering over her glasses at Knox. "Most cases like this involve distant relatives or foster systems." "I'm aware," Knox replied calmly. "You're a corporate billionaire. And she's a tenacious 11-year-old who pitched me the most honest investment proposal I've ever received." The judge blinked, then looked down at Ivy. "And what do you think about all this, young lady?" Ivy's voice was soft but certain. "I think he sees me. Not just my problems. Not just what I need. He sees me." The judge smiled slowly. "Well, Miss Quinn, today, you get a new last name. But it sounds like you've already found what matters most." When the gavel dropped, it echoed through the room like a heartbeat. Rachel held back tears, but one slipped anyway. Ivy turned to Knox, eyes wide. "So, I'm really yours now. You always were." He crouched down, pulled her into a hug that lasted just long enough for both of them to feel the shift, that subtle, irreversible magic of belonging. Life didn't change in a flash of glitter. It changed slowly. Subtly. The new apartment Knox moved them into wasn't in a skyscraper or mansion. It was a brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, with ivy on the walls and a park across the street. Rachel insisted on doing her own grocery shopping. Knox bought Ivy a bike, but refused to hire a tutor unless she asked for one. "I don't want to turn her world into mine," he told Rachel over dinner one night. "I want to build a world where we all fit." There were breakfasts together. Not always fancy, sometimes just cereal and quiet. There were movie nights. Knox fell asleep halfway through most of them, and Rachel started laughing more freely, like she was slowly remembering how. Ivy drew pictures of them, 3 stick figures holding hands under a giant sun, the word family scrawled in crayon across the top. "And Knox." He started writing back. Not every letter, but some. "Dear Ivy, I never believed in second chances. You changed that. Thank you for investing in me too. Dad." He had never called himself that before. But when she read it, Ivy smiled so wide, it felt like the world was new. From strangers, to a bond built by choice. From letters, to laughter. From survival, to love. They weren't perfect, but they were real. And now, finally, they were together. The spring morning bloomed soft and golden. Outside the brownstone, cherry blossoms floated lazily in the breeze, dotting the sidewalk in shades of blush and cream. Inside, the smell of pancakes and fresh coffee drifted through the open kitchen. Rachel stood at the stove, humming a tune she hadn't remembered in years. Ivy was at the table, scribbling into her journal with furrowed brows and a mouthful of syrup. "What are you working on, Sarah?" Knox asked, peeking over her shoulder. "An essay for school," she said, flipping the notebook shut with a sheepish grin. "We have to write about something that changed our life. And let me guess. You picked that rusty old bike I got you," he teased. Ivy laughed, a sound as bright as morning light. "Nope. Something smaller. But way more powerful." Knox raised an eyebrow, but said nothing more. He didn't have to. He already knew. That night, Ivy tucked herself into bed, her old showbox of letters now resting on a shelf above her pillow. She no longer needed to add to it. But she never stopped reading them, her words, her hopes, her belief that something extraordinary could come from something so simple. Rachel peeked in, kissed her forehead. "You okay, baby?" "I'm really happy, Mom." "Me too," Rachel whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Ivy's face. "I don't worry anymore." He loves you. And he sees you. I see it every day. In the room next door, Knox stood by the window, staring out at the quiet street, hands in his pockets. He still had the first letter. The real one. Folded and worn at the edges. He kept it in his desk, not because it reminded him of her, but because it reminded him of himself. The boy he used to be. The boy who once thought no one would ever care. Now he was a man who made breakfast on Sundays, watched cartoons he pretended to hate, and learned how to braid hair, very badly. He was still a billionaire. But more importantly, he was Dad. Years later, when Ivy stood at her graduation podium, 17 and radiant, her voice rang out strong and clear. I used to believe I had to carry everything on my own. That strength meant silence, and hope was just for fairy tales. She looked at Knox and Rachel sitting in the front row, hands clasped. But then I wrote a letter. The audience went still. I didn't ask to be saved. I asked to be seen. And someone answered. She smiled. That letter changed my life. But more than that, it gave me a family. Not by blood. By choice. And that's the greatest kind of love there is. Later that evening, when they sat in the backyard under strings of fairy lights, Knox handed her a small box. Inside was the original letter. Thought it belonged to you now, he said. Ivy's eyes filled. She held the letter like it was something sacred. I'll keep it forever, she whispered. So I never forget where everything started. Knox smiled, pulling her into a side hug. Just promise me one thing, he said. What's that? If anyone ever writes you a letter like that someday, I'll answer it, she said, without hesitation. I'll be someone's Knox Wilder. He chuckled. God help them. But in his eyes, there was pride. There was peace. And there was a future. Together, they looked up at the stars. One family. One letter. And 1,000 second chances. Some stories don't end with a final page. They linger. In a letter tucked away in a drawer. In a whisper exchanged across a dinner table. In the gentle way someone reaches for your hand, not because they have to, but because they want to. Ivy never imagined $338 and a single sheet of notebook paper would rewrite her life. But it did. Because sometimes, the smallest spark of courage lights the way to the biggest miracles. And sometimes, the person who receives a cry for help is the one who's been waiting their whole life to answer it. Knox Wilder didn't save Ivy. She saved him first, with honesty. With trust. With a belief that kindness wasn't extinct. And Rachel was the heartbeat. The anchor. Proof that a mother's love isn't loud or flashy, but fierce in its silence. Her refusal to surrender her daughter's dignity became the very reason they found someone who respected it. This story is about family. But not the kind that shares blood. The kind that shares choice. The kind that says, I see you. I choose you. Every single day. Because a letter can change a moment. A moment can change a life. And love, real, brave, unconditional love, can change everything.